Safeguarding is protecting vulnerable adults or children from abuse or neglect. Safeguarding should make sure that people get the support they need to make the most of their lives and get their full and equal rights. There are many different forms of abuse, and they all result in behavior towards a person that deliberately or intentionally causes harm. It is a violation of an individual's human and civil rights, and in the worst cases can result in death. Victims may suffer severe neglect, injury, distress, and/or depression, and people without capacity, such as those people with severe dementia, are particularly vulnerable. Cases of abuse can result in criminal prosecution and action being taken by the courts. The safeguarding duties apply to an adult who is 18 and over, has needs for care and support, whether or not the local authority is meeting any of those needs, is experiencing or at risk of harm of abuse or neglect, and as a result of those care and support needs is unable to protect themselves from either risk of harm of or experience of abuse or neglect. There are many factors that could increase the risk of abuse for people dependent on others for assistance, especially with finances and personal care, those with mental incapacity, communication difficulties, or decreased mobility, those without visitors, those subjected to hate crimes, people having care in their own homes, those not knowing where to turn to for help, people who might also think that the standard of care or treatment they are receiving is all they can expect. The following conditions can increase vulnerability: a learning disability, mental health issues, a physical or sensory impairment, if the person is frail or an older person. Abuse of adults at risk does not have to be deliberate, malicious, or planned. It sometimes happens when people are trying to do their best but do not know the right thing to do. Sometimes the person who causes harm does so because of frustration, even in the caring context. However, irrespective of why the abuse might happen, any abuse of an adult at risk is harmful. This makes it vitally important to ensure that those involved with the care and well-being of adults at risk have a clear sense of what signifies abuse and what must happen should abuse be suspected or discovered. In the Care and Support Statutory Guidance issued under the Care Act 2014, the Department of Health Chapter 1416 considers the different types and patterns of abuse and neglect and the different circumstances in which they may take place. The following list is not intended to be exhaustive, but is an illustrative guide as to the sort of behavior which could give rise to a safeguarding concern. Discriminatory abuse. Discriminatory abuse includes forms of harassment, slurs or similar treatment because of race, gender, gender identity, age, disability, sexual orientation, religion. Discriminatory abuse can take the form of derogatory comments, harassment, being made to move to a different resource or service based on age, being denied medical treatment on the grounds of age or mental health, and or not providing access. Psychological abuse. Psychological abuse includes emotional abuse, threats of harm or abandonment, deprivation of contact, humiliation, blaming, controlling, intimidation, coercion, harassment, verbal abuse, cyberbullying, isolation, unreasonable and unjustified withdrawal of services or supportive networks. Psychological abuse continues. It is important not to jump to the wrong conclusions too quickly, but the following may be indicators of many different problems. Ambivalence about the carer. Fearfulness, avoiding eye contact, flinching on approach, deference, insomnia or the need for excessive sleep, change in appetite, unusual weight loss or gain, tearfulness, unexplained paranoia, low self-esteem, confusion, agitation, possible violation of human and/or civil rights, distress caused by being locked in a home or car, isolation, no visitors or phone calls allowed, inappropriate clothing, sensory deprivation, restricted access to hygiene facilities, lack of personal respect, lack of recognition of individual rights. Carer does not offer personal hygiene, medical care, or regular food or drinks, and/or use of furniture to restrict movement. Financial abuse. Financial or material abuse includes theft, fraud, internet scamming, coercion in relation to an adult's financial affairs or arrangements, including in connection with wills, property, inheritance, or financial transactions. The misuse or misappropriation of property, possessions, or benefits. Financial abuse continued. It is important not to jump to the wrong conclusions too quickly, but the following is a list of possible indicators of financial abuse. Sudden inability to pay bills, sudden withdrawal of money from an account, person lacking belongings that they can clearly afford, lack of receptivity by the person's relatives to necessary expenditure, power of attorney obtained when the person is unable to understand what they are signing, extraordinary interest by family members in the vulnerable person's assets, recent changes of deeds of the house or property. The main interest of the carer is financial, with little regard for the health and welfare of the vulnerable adult. The person managing the vulnerable adult's finances is evasive and uncooperative. Reluctance to accept care services. Purchase of items that the individual does not require or use. Personal items going missing. And/or unreasonable or inappropriate gifts. Organizational abuse. Organizational abuse includes neglect, poor care practice within an institution or specific care setting, such as a hospital or care home, poor practice in relation to care provided in one's own home. This may range from one-off incidents to ongoing ill treatment. It can be through neglect or poor professional practice as a result of the structure, policies, processes and practices within an organization. Organizational abuse continued. The following list may be possible indicators of institutional abuse. No flexibility in bedtime routine and/or deliberate waking. People left on a commode or toilet for long periods of time. Inappropriate care of possessions, clothing and living area. Lack of personal clothes and belongings. Unhomely or stark living environments. Deprived environmental conditions and lack of stimulation. Inappropriate use of medical procedures such as enemas or catheterization. Batch care. Lack of individual care program. Illegal confinement or restrictions. Inappropriate use of power or control. People referred to or spoken to with disrespect. Inflexible services based on convenience of the provider rather than the person receiving services. Inappropriate physical intervention. Service user removed from the home or establishment without discussion with other appropriate people or agencies because staff are unable to manage the behavior. Neglects and acts of omission. Neglect and acts of omission include ignoring medical, emotional, or physical care needs, failure to provide access to appropriate health, care and support or educational services, the withholding of the necessities of life such as medication, adequate nutrition, and heating. Potential indicators include poor environmental conditions, inadequate heating and lighting, poor physical condition of the vulnerable adult, clothing is ill-fitting, unclean, and in poor condition, malnutrition, failure to give prescribed medication properly, failure to provide appropriate privacy and dignity, inconsistent or reluctant contact with health and social care agencies, isolation, denying access to callers or visitors. Physical abuse. Physical abuse includes assault, hitting, slapping, pushing, misuse of medication, restraint or inappropriate physical sanction. Potential indicators include history of unexplained falls, unexplained bruising in well-protected areas or soft parts of the body, bruising in different stages of healing, unexplained burns in unusual locations, unexplained fractures to any part of the body, unexplained lacerations or abrasions, slap, kick, punch, finger marks, injury shaped similar to an object, untreated medical problems, weight loss due to malnutrition or dehydration. Sexual abuse. Sexual abuse includes rape, indecent exposure, sexual harassment, inappropriate looking or touching, sexual teasing or innuendo, sexual photography, subjection to pornography or witnessing sexual acts, indecent exposure and sexual assault or sexual acts to which the adult has not consented or was pressured into. Sexual abuse continued. Potential indicators include sudden change in behavior, sudden onset of confusion, incontinence, withdrawal, overtly sexual behavior or language by the vulnerable adult, self-inflicted injury, disturbed sleep pattern, poor concentration, difficulty in walking, torn, stained underwear, love bites, pain or itching, bruising or bleeding in the genital area, sexually transmitted disease, urinary tract or vaginal infection, bruising to upper thighs and arms, frequent infection, severe upset or agitation when being bathed, etc., pregnancy in a person unable to consent. Domestic abuse. Domestic abuse includes psychological abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse, financial abuse, emotional abuse, so-called honor-based violence. Indicators of domestic abuse are compatible with those for the type of abuse being perpetrated. Modern slavery. Modern slavery includes slavery, human trafficking, forced labor and domestic servitude. Traffickers and slave masters use whatever means they have at their disposal to coerce, deceive, and force individuals into a life of abuse, servitude, and inhumane treatment. Self-neglect. Self-neglect includes a wide range of behavior neglecting to care for one's personal hygiene, health, or surroundings, and includes behaviors such as hoarding. Abuse can occur anywhere and is not confined to any one setting. Just because there are no records of abuse having occurred does not mean it has not happened or is not happening now. It is important to remain alert for the signs at all times. For example, abuse can occur in a nursing, residential, or daycare setting, in a person's own home, in another place previously assumed safe, for example, prison, in a hospital or public place, in education, training, or a workplace setting. Anyone can witness or become aware of information suggesting that abuse is occurring. It is important that everyone understands what to do and where to get help and advice. It is vital that everyone remains vigilant on behalf of those unable to protect themselves. This will include knowing about different types of abuse and neglect and their signs, supporting adults to keep them safe, knowing who to tell about suspected abuse or neglect, and supporting adults to think and weigh up the risks and benefits of different options when exercising choice and control. Remember, if you see something, say something. Don't stay silent if you suspect abuse.